The airport tarmac shimmered with heat, but the chill in Malik Thompson's veins was colder than ice. He'd faced racism before, but being barred from his own private jet by a smirking pilot? That was a new low. Malik stood tall, his tailored suit pristine despite the Texas sun beating down on the private airfield. His jaw tightened as Captain Reynolds, a wiry man with a pilot's cap tilted just so, leaned against the jet's staircase, arms crossed. "Sorry, sir," Reynolds drawled, his tone dripping with condescension. "But I don't think this is your plane." The word "sir" sounded like a slur in his mouth. Malik's eyes narrowed. "Check the manifest again. My name's Malik Thompson. I own this jet." Reynolds chuckled, glancing at the clipboard in his hand as if it were a prop in a bad play. "Thompson, huh? Don't see that here. Maybe you're confused. This is a private airfield, not a bus station." The small crowd of ground crew and onlookers shifted uncomfortably, their murmurs barely audible over the hum of distant engines. Malik's pulse thundered in his ears. He'd built his tech empire from nothing coding in his dorm room at MIT, pitching to investors who doubted a black man could outsmart Silicon Valley. Now, at 35, he owned a Gulfstream G650, a gleaming symbol of his success. And yet, here he was, reduced to proving his worth to a man who saw only his skin. "You're making a mistake," Malik said, his voice low but sharp, like a blade sheathed for now. "Call your supervisor." Reynolds smirked wider, unfazed. "I don't take orders from you. Why don't you head back to wherever you came from?" The implication hung heavy, and a few onlookers gasped. Sarah Nguyen, the airport manager, appeared from the hangar, her heels clicking furiously on the asphalt. Her face, usually calm and professional, was a storm of disbelief. "Captain Reynolds, what's going on here?" she demanded, her eyes darting between the pilot and Malik. "This guy claims he owns the jet," Reynolds said, jerking a thumb at Malik. "I'm just doing my job, making sure the right people get on board." Sarah's brow furrowed. She'd worked with Malik before. He was a regular client, always polite, always tipping generously. "Malik Thompson owns this jet," she said, her voice rising. "I've seen the paperwork myself. What's the problem?" Reynolds shrugged, his nonchalance infuriating. "Paperwork can be faked. I'm not letting just anyone waltz onto a multimillion-dollar aircraft. You know how it is, Sarah. Gotta be careful these days." Malik's hands twitched, itching to grab the clipboard and shove the truth in Reynolds' face. But he'd learned long ago that anger only fueled men like this. Instead, he pulled out his phone, his movements deliberate. "One call," he said, locking eyes with Reynolds. "That's all it'll take to end this." Reynolds laughed, a sharp bark that echoed across the tarmac. "Go ahead, call your lawyer. Or your mom. Won't change a thing." Sarah stepped closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Captain, you're out of line. Step aside and let Mr. Thompson board." "Not until I'm sure," Reynolds snapped, his facade cracking just enough to reveal the stubborn prejudice beneath. "I've got a responsibility to the owner." "I am the owner," Malik cut in, his voice like thunder now. He dialed a number, his fingers steady despite the rage simmering inside. The phone rang once, twice, then a crisp voice answered. "Malik, what's wrong?" It was Laura, his COO, a woman who could move mountains with a single email. "I'm being denied entry to my own jet," Malik said, loud enough for Reynolds to hear. "Captain Reynolds doesn't believe I'm the owner. I need you to handle this. Now." Laura didn't hesitate. "Put me on speaker." Malik complied, holding the phone out. Laura's voice crackled through, sharp and authoritative. "This is Laura Bennett, COO of Thompson Technologies. Malik Thompson is the sole owner of the Gulfstream G650. registration N472MT. Captain Reynolds, you're obstructing a client on his private property. Stand down or you're done. Reynolds' smirk faltered, but he doubled down. I don't know who you are, lady. I'm following protocol. Sarah snatched the clipboard from Reynolds' hand, scanning it furiously. Her eyes widened. Your protocol is garbage. His name is right here, clear as day. Malik Thompson, owner and passenger. She shoved the clipboard back at him. You're not just Rangieri deliberately causing a scene. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of shock and disapproval. A young ground crew worker, barely out of his teens, stepped forward, his voice shaky but firm. I saw Mr. Thompson's ID when he checked in. He's legit. Reynolds' face reddened, his confidence crumbling. This is ridiculous. I'm protecting the asset. You're protecting your ego, Malik said, his voice cutting through like a whip. You saw a black man and decided I didn't belong. That's not protocol. That's prejudice. The words landed like a punch, and the crowd fell silent. Sarah's eyes blazed as she turned to Reynolds. You're done here. Get off the tarmac. You can't fire me. Reynolds sputtered, his voice rising to a desperate pitch. I've been with this company for 15 years. Then you should have known better, Sarah shot back. She grabbed her radio, her voice steady. Security, escort Captain Reynolds off the premises. Now. 2 uniformed guards appeared, moving swiftly toward Reynolds. The pilot's bravado collapsed entirely as they flanked him, guiding him away from the jet. He shouted over his shoulder, "This isn't over. You'll hear from my union." Malik watched him go, his chest tight with a mix of vindication and exhaustion. The victory felt hollow. He'd won this round, but how many more would there be? How many more times would he have to prove he belonged in spaces he'd earned? Sarah touched his arm, her expression softening. I'm so sorry, Malik. This should never have happened. He nodded, forcing a small smile. Not your fault, but thank you. As he climbed the steps to his jet, the crowd dispersed, some whispering apologies, others avoiding his gaze. The interior of the Gulfstream was cool and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Malik sank into a leather seat, staring out the window as the tarmac crew prepared for takeoff. He thought of his father, a janitor who'd worked nights to send him to coding camp. They'll try to push you out, son, he'd said once, mopping a hospital floor. But you keep walking through those doors. You belong. Malik's phone buzzed. A text from Laura. Reynolds is fired. New pilot en route. Safe travels. He exhaled, the weight lifting slightly. But the real battle wasn't over a jet or a pilot. It was the fight to be seen, to be respected, to exist without justification. And that fight, Malik knew, was far from won. The jet's engines roared to life, and Malik leaned back, closing his eyes. The incident had shaken him, but it also steeled his resolve. He'd built Thompson Technologies to disrupt industries, to create opportunities for those the world overlooked. This wasn't just about him, it was about every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong. Back on the tarmac, Sarah stood watching the jet taxi away, her hands trembling with anger. She'd seen prejudice before, but this was personal. Malik was her friend, her client, a man whose generosity had funded scholarships for local kids. She turned to the ground crew, her voice firm. We're auditing every employee's conduct, starting today. This stops now. The young crew member who'd spoken up, Javier, nodded. I've seen it too, Ms. Nguyen. Not just here. Everywhere. Sarah met his gaze, seeing the same fire she felt. Then we change it. Together. Meanwhile, in the airport's break room, Reynolds sat fuming, his phone clutched tightly. He'd already called his union rep, ranting about unfair treatment. But deep down, he knew the truth. He'd let his biases cloud his judgment, and it had cost him everything. As Malik's jet soared into the sky, he opened his laptop, pulling up a draft of his next project. A platform to expose workplace discrimination, anonymized but powerful, giving a voice to those silenced by fear. He typed the first line, "No one should have to prove they belong." The words felt like a promise, not just to himself but to everyone who'd faced a closed door. The jet climbed higher, cutting through the clouds, and Malik felt a spark of hope. The world was broken, but he'd keep building brick by brick, code by code until it changed. Malik's story didn't end with that flight. Over the next weeks, the incident at the airfield became a flashpoint. A bystander had recorded the confrontation, and the video went viral, sparking outrage across social media. Hashtags like Justice for Malik trended for days, with Thompson Technologies stock soaring as supporters rallied behind Malik's mission. But not everyone was on his side. Online trolls and talking heads accused him of playing the race card, claiming Reynolds was just doing his job. Malik ignored the noise, focusing instead on his new platform, which he named Open Doors. It launched quietly but gained traction fast, with thousands of users sharing stories of discrimination, some heartbreaking, others infuriating, all painfully real. Sarah, meanwhile, took her promise seriously. She spearheaded a diversity training program at the airfield, bringing in experts to confront biases head-on. Javier, the young crew member, became her right hand, organizing workshops and speaking out about his own experiences as a Latino in a mostly white industry. Reynolds, stripped of his license after an investigation uncovered a pattern of discriminatory behavior, faded into obscurity. But his downfall wasn't the point. The real victory was the ripple effect. Companies across the aviation industry began reviewing their policies, prompted by the public outcry. Malik's jet landed in San Francisco that evening, and as he stepped onto the tarmac, he felt different. Not lighter exactly, but stronger. He'd faced the ugliness of prejudice and come out standing. His father's words echoed again, "You belong." And for the first time in a long time, Malik believed it. The San Francisco skyline glittered as Malik's jet touched down, but his mind was far from the city's glow. The incident at the Texas airfield replayed in his head, each word from Captain Reynolds like a splinter under his skin. He'd won the battle, but the war against prejudice was relentless. As he stepped into the cool night air, his phone buzzed incessantly. Texts, emails, and notifications flooded in. The video of the confrontation had spread like wildfire, and the world was watching. Malik's driver, a quiet man named Marcus, greeted him with a nod. "Rough day, boss?" he asked, eyeing Malik's tense expression. "You could say that," Malik replied, sliding into the back of the black SUV. "Ever had someone look at you like you don't belong?" Marcus chuckled dryly, his eyes meeting Malik's in the rearview mirror. "Every day, man. Grew up in Oakland. You don't forget those looks." Malik nodded, the shared understanding grounding him. "We're gonna do something about it." Back at Thompson Technologies headquarters, the office was a hive of activity despite the late hour. Laura, his COO, met him at the elevator, her tablet glowing with data. "The video's at 10 million views," she said, her voice a mix of excitement and urgency. "We're getting support from all corners, activists, celebrities, even some politicians. But there's backlash too. The usual suspects saying you staged it for clout." Malik's jaw tightened. "Let them talk. We're not stopping." Laura led him to the conference room, where a small team was already brainstorming. Open Doors, the platform Malik had envisioned on the flight, was taking shape faster than he'd expected. Coders typed furiously, designing an interface that was sleek yet accessible, allowing users to submit anonymous accounts of discrimination. A legal team was on standby to protect contributors from retaliation. Malik stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding despite his exhaustion. "This isn't just about me," he said, his voice steady. "It's about the kid who gets followed in a store, the woman passed over for a promotion, the guy who gets pulled over for looking suspicious. Open Doors is their megaphone." The team nodded, their energy palpable. A young developer, Priya, raised her hand. "We've got a prototype ready. Want to see it?" Malik sat down and Priya pulled up the demo. The platform was simple but powerful. Users could share stories, tag industries, and even connect with resources like legal aid or counseling. A map feature highlighted hotspots where discrimination reports clustered, turning data into a weapon for accountability. Malik felt a surge of pride. This was why he'd started coding all those years ago, not just to build apps, but to build change. By morning, Open Doors was live. Malik posted the first story himself, recounting the airfield incident in stark, unfiltered detail. He didn't name Reynolds, but he didn't need to. Video had already done the damage. Within hours, thousands of stories poured in. A barista in Seattle described being called a racial slur by a customer. A nurse in Chicago shared how her supervisor assumed she was a janitor. Each story was a thread in a tapestry of systemic injustice, and Malik read them all, his heart heavy but resolute. Meanwhile, in Texas, Sarah Nguyen was waging her own war. The airfield's parent company, Horizon Aviation, had launched an internal investigation after the video went viral. Sarah sat in a sterile boardroom, facing a panel of executives who looked more concerned about PR than justice. "This isn't an isolated incident," she argued, her voice sharp. "I've reviewed personnel files. Reynolds had complaints against him before microaggressions, biased comments. You ignored them." The lead executive, a silver-haired man named Gregson, shifted uncomfortably. "We take these matters seriously, Ms. Nguyen, but we can't fire someone based on rumors." "Rumors," Sarah snapped, sliding a folder across the table. "Here are signed statements from 5 employees, including Javier, corroborating a pattern of behavior. Reynolds didn't just make a mistake, he targeted Malik because of his race." Gregson's face tightened, but Sarah wasn't done. "If you don't act, I'll take this to the press. And trust me, they're already circling." Back in San Francisco, Malik faced his own challenges. A conservative talk show host had invited him for an interview, framing it as a chance to tell his side. Laura was skeptical. "It's a trap," she warned. "They'll twist your words, make it about reverse racism or some nonsense." Malik agreed but saw an opportunity. "If I don't go, they control the narrative. I can handle them." The interview was a battlefield. The host, a polished man named Carson, leaned forward with a predatory smile. "Mr. Thompson, some say you overreacted. Captain Reynolds was just doing his job, ensuring security. Isn't this a misunderstanding blown out of proportion?" Malik didn't flinch. If checking a manifest is his job, he failed. "My name was there, clear as day. He didn't question my identity because of protocol, questioned it because I'm black. That's not a misunderstanding. That's prejudice." Carson pivoted, his tone syrupy. "But don't you think this focus on race divides us? Shouldn't we move past these labels?" Malik's laugh was sharp, cutting through the studio's hum. "I'd love to move past labels, but the world keeps sticking them on me. I don't get to choose when race matters. People like Reynolds decide that for me." The clip went viral, too, with supporters praising Malik's clarity and detractors accusing him of stoking division. But the real impact was on Open Doors. The platform's user base doubled overnight, and companies named in stories began issuing public apologies or scrambling to cover their tracks. In Texas, Javier was becoming a force of his own. He'd started a blog, amplifying the airfield's changes and sharing his own story of being overlooked for promotions despite his skills. His posts caught the attention of a local activist group, who invited him to speak at a rally. Standing before a crowd of hundreds, Javier's voice shook at first but grew stronger. "I saw what happened to Malik, and I couldn't stay quiet. We deserve better not just at work, but everywhere." Sarah watched from the sidelines, her chest swelling with pride. She'd secured funding for a scholarship in Malik's name, targeting underrepresented youth in aviation. It wasn't enough to erase the past, but it was a start. Months passed and Open Doors became a movement. Malik's team added features: a mentorship network, a job board for inclusive employers, even a chatbot offering real-time advice for handling discrimination. The platform's data revealed patterns. Industries like tech, finance, and aviation were rife with complaints. Malik shared the findings at a TED Talk, his voice steady but passionate. "This isn't about shame. It's about truth. We can't fix what we don't face." The backlash persisted. Some companies sued, claiming defamation, but Malik's legal team was ready, armed with airtight evidence. Others tried to co-opt the movement, issuing hollow diversity statements. Malik called them out, refusing to let the cause be diluted. "This isn't about press releases," he tweeted. "It's about people." One evening, Malik returned to the Texas airfield for a meeting with Sarah and Javier. The same tarmac where he'd been humiliated now felt different, alive with possibility. Sarah showed him the new training program, complete with VR simulations to confront bias. Javier handed him a prototype of a safety app for workers facing harassment. "Inspired by you," Javier said, grinning. Malik smiled, but his thoughts drifted to his father, who'd passed away the year before. He wished he could have seen this. His son not just walking through doors but kicking them open for others. As they stood by the jet, now emblazoned with the Open Doors logo, Sarah broke the silence. "You changed things, Malik. Not just here, but everywhere." He shook his head. "We did. And we're not done." The jet's engines hummed, ready for another flight. Malik boarded, this time without a fight, but the weight of the journey lingered. Change was slow, messy, and incomplete. Yet every story on Open Doors, every scholarship funded, every policy rewritten was proof it was possible. He looked out the window as the plane climbed, the world shrinking below. The fight wasn't over, but for now, he'd won something bigger than a jet. A voice that couldn't be silenced. What do you think? Where do we draw the line between right and wrong in a world quick to judge? How do we build justice without tearing each other apart?